solving quadratic equations. Have you ever looked at a quadratic equation and thought, this is impossible? Well, here's the good news. Solving quadratic equations is actually very easy once you understand how to use the quadratic formula. In fact, the quadratic formula is one of the most powerful tools in mathematics because it works for all quadratic equations. Whether the equation factors easily or not, the quadratic formula will always help you find the solution. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to use it step by step. Let's get started. Step 1. Identify a quadratic equation. A quadratic equation is usually written in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equal 0, where a is the coefficient of x squared, b is the coefficient of x, and c is the constant term. For example, with that equation right there, 2x squared plus 7x minus 4 is equal to 0, a would be equal to 2, b would be equal to 7, and c would be equal to negative 14. Let's first look at some key terms. Coefficients are the numbers in front of the variables in an equation. For example, 4x plus 3y is equal to 1. The coefficients are 4 because it is in front of x and 3 because it is in front of y. A constant is a value that does not change. Examples of constants include 5, negative 3, 12.7, and 100. These are called constant because the value of the term does not change. 5 is just 5. Negative 3 is just negative 3. Step 2. Write down the quadratic formula. Here you have it. This is your quadratic formula right here. This is the formula that we'll use whenever we're asked to solve a quadratic equation. It works for all quadratic equations. So this is the formula. X is equal to negative b plus or minus, and this symbol right here, this sign right here is very important. So negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, where a is only the coefficient, is just the coefficient of x squared, and b is just the coefficient of x, and c will be our constant term. So at first glance it may look intimidating. However, you only need to substitute the values of a, b, and c into the formula and simplify. For example, here we have our first example right here of a quadratic equation, and why we know it's a quadratic equation? Well, there's an x squared. So we have 2x squared minus 18 is equal to 0. So the first thing that we're going to do, we're going to put it in the form. We're going to put it in the standard form, which would be a x squared plus b squared plus c is equal to 0. So we have to put it in this form right above in order to solve. So if we're gonna put our equation below in the form right here, we're gonna have to see if we have all our coefficients or all our terms. Now looking at this right here, I can see that my term right here for ax squared, it is going to be my 2x squared. My term for my bx now, I realize that there is no x in this equation right here, and because there is no x, that means that our b is going to be 0, because 0 multiplied by anything will be 0. And our constant now, the constant term, and the constant is just a number, it is going to be 18, because negative 18 right here is just the number 18. It will not change. So that 18 right there, it is the constant. and we have our 0 that it should be equal to. So what we're going to do now, we're just going to write what our A is, and we're also going to write what our B is, and we're going to also write what our C is. So our A is going to be the coefficient of x squared, so that's going to be 2. B, the coefficient of x is going to be 0, because there's no x term right here. And the coefficient for the constant, or what I should say, the constant in this equation, it is negative 18. So now that we have what our A is, our B is, and our C is, all we're going to do is to plug it into this formula right here, and we'll be able to solve to find what our x is equal to. So the first thing we're going to do is to rewrite our formula by rewrite our formula and substitute all our A and our B and our C using what we have above. So let's rewrite our formula. So that's going to be negative, our B is 0, so that's gonna be 0. Negative 0 is just gonna be 0, plus or minus the square root of B. Again, I said that B is 0, so 0 squared minus 4. A is 2, and C is negative 18, all over 2A. So 2A is going to be 2 times our A is 2. Alright, so now that we have that, we're just gonna write what it is equal to right here. So negative 0, you're just going to have your 0 right there, so that's gonna be 0 plus or minus the square root of 0 squared, that's gonna be nothing right there, and all we're gonna do is just multiply all our terms right here. So we're gonna multiply negative 4 times 2. Negative 4 times 2 is going to be negative 8, and then we're going to have our negative 8 times, so let me just write it right here a little bit smaller. So what I'm trying to say is that we're just going to multiply all our terms right here. So the 4 is going to multiply the 2, and it's also going to multiply the 18. So negative 4 times 2, that's going to be negative 8, and negative 8 times 18, that's going to be 144. So you're gonna have 144, and the reason why the 144 is positive is because negative 4 times 2, that's gonna be negative 8, so that's gonna be negative 8, and negative 8 times 18, negative 8 times 18, that's gonna give you positive, so you end up with positive 144. Okay, so you'll have 144 alone because there's a 0 squared. 0 squared is nothing. All over. So all over. All over. Alright, so all of that all over 2 times 2, and 2 times 2 is 4. So now that we have that, all we're going to do is just rewrite what we have right there. So plus or negative. So with a plus or negative, we're going to have two terms right here. Because they are plus or negative, we need to find what the square root of 144 is. The square root of 144, that's going to be 12. So we're going to have, this is where the sign right here. So this is where the sign right here comes into play now. So I told you that this sign right here is very important. The plus or negative, we're going to have our plus or minus 12 over 4. So this plus or minus 12 over 4 is gonna be, this means that we have to separate it into two parts. One where we have a positive 12 or plus 12 over 4, and we also have and negative 12 over 4. So now that we have that right there, we're going to have two values for x. So x is going to be equal to, so 12 divided by 4, that's going to be 3. So we have a positive 3, and 4 divided by negative 12, that's going to be, x is going to be equal to negative 3. So this is all that we did right there to solve the question. So we just plug all our values for a, b, and c, and we just solve. We solve by, working our 4ac first. So our 4ac, we'll work that first by just multiplying all the three terms. Multiply your negative 4 by whatever a is, by whatever c is. After multiplying, you would either subtract or add that to your b squared if it's gonna be a negative or positive. So you would definitely work this first, and after working what's inside the bracket right here, then when you get that final answer, you'll just square root everything, because after we work everything inside our bracket right here, we got 144. Why? Our b is 0, so 0 squared is just 0, that's nothing. So we're just left with 4 multiplied by a and c, so that would be 144. Square root of 144, that's going to be 12, so we end up with plus or minus 12 all over 4, because 2 is going to be 2 times 2, because a is 2. Negative b, that's going to be 0, because b is 0 right here, so negative 0 is nothing, so it'll be like it's not there. B is not there basically. So that's how we work our our formula right there. So in the end, we ended up with positive or plus or minus 12 over 4. And to be honest with you, I didn't even have to write the 0 right there. I could have just left it as, because I know that this is 0, I could have left this as positive or plus or minus the square root of 144 over 4, and I continue. So I didn't even have to put the 0 right there. With quadratic equations, we're always gonna have we normally have two x terms or two answers for x. So in this case right here, we have two values for x, and the two values for x right here is two values for x is right here, where x is equal to positive 3. So x is equal to positive 3, and x is also equal to negative 3. So this is where our positive and negative sign come into play. Alright, so why do we get two answers? Notice the symbol, the plus or minus sign. So this means that every time you use the quadratic formula, you must calculate two possibilities, one using adding or addition and one using subtraction. That's why many quadratic equations have two solutions. So in this case right here, the plus or minus sign right here played a major role at the last part. So after we would have done majority of the work, where we'd get, find the square root of, b squared minus 4ax, which would have been, 144. After we find the square root of that, and we'll have 12. This is where the plus or minus sign takes place, or that's when it plays its part. Separated into two parts, we will have the positive 12 and the negative 12, all divided by 4. So we have two possibilities, one where we're dividing 4 by a positive 12, and one we're dividing by dividing a negative 12. So that's how we got the two possibilities, and that's the reason why we have a positive 3 and a negative 3. All right, moving on. So let's look at example 2. I will move a bit quickly for this question. So we're gonna do the same thing. We're just gonna rewrite our equation, and we're gonna rewrite it right here. So that's gonna be negative b. In this case right here, let's first write our general equation. So we should have a x squared plus b squared plus our constant are equal to 0. So we should have it in this format right there. So looking at my equation right there, I realize that my a, meaning the coefficient, the number in front of my x squared, it is going to be 1, because if I see x by itself, whenever I see x by itself, I know that the coefficient is always 1, right? Our b is going to be equal to 2 this is going to be my 2. My b is going to be 2 because that is the coefficient for our x term right there. We have our b in this case. But if you look at this equation, unlike the one before, there is no constant. There's no number standing by itself. So there's no constant right there. So for our c is just going to be equal to 0. In other words, there's no c. There's nothing for c. It's just 0. So now that we know what is our a, our b, and our c, we will use our formula to solve our equation. So let's rewrite first. And by rewriting, I will quickly just change the marker. So I'm going to have my negative b. So my negative b is going to be negative b. So that's going to be negative 2 plus our minus sign. The square root of, so 2 squared because 2b is 2, minus 4 times a times c, and c is gonna be 0 right here. Alright, all over 2 times, so 2 times a, so that's gonna be 2 times 1. Alright, so let's see what that's equal to. So that will be equal to, we're gonna have our negative 2 plus or minus the square root of negative 2 squared, sorry, 2 squared. So 2 squared is just 2 times 2. 2 times 2 is 4, minus negative 4 times 1 is going to be negative 4, but negative 4 times 0, anything multiplied by 0 is going to be 0, all over 2 times a is 1, so 2 times 1 is going to be 2. Alright, so we will end up with basically just the square root of 4. So let's continue right down there. So let's continue with it right now. Alright, so now that we have this, we're just going to finish it below. So it's gonna be, we're just gonna continue this part right down that side. So it's gonna be negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 4 all over 2. Okay, so the square root of 4, the square root of 4 is gonna be 2. So now we have 2 possibilities where we have negative 2 plus the square root of 4 is going to be 2, so negative 2 plus 2 all over 2, and we're going to have x is also equal to, I'm going to put it in different color, we're going to have negative 2 again minus 2 all over 2. So let's quickly solve that above. So these two calculations I'll do above, because that's what I'm gonna use in order to get the answer. So this is what I'm gonna be using, these two. So after all calculations, I have my 2 final answers for x, for the x's. So let's do it. Let's finish it off above. So using my eraser, I'm just gonna finish it off above right here. So first let's work on this one. So negative 2 plus 0, negative 2 plus 2, that's gonna be equal to, maybe I should write it right there. So negative 2 plus 2 is going to be equal to, all over 2 is going to be equal to 0 over 2, and that is just 0. So x is going to be equal to 0. And now we have our negative 2 minus 2. So right here, if we have our negative 2, so for this one right here, if I have negative 2 minus 2 over 2, that's going to be equal to negative 4 over 2, and that will be equal to negative 2. So in for final, we have where x is equal to 0 and x is equal to negative 2. So x is going to be equal to 0 and x is going to be equal to negative 2. And if you realize right there, I separated it right here, the two parts right here, because of the sign. So the plus or minus means that I'm going to have my negative 2 plus the square root of 4. Square root of 4 is going to be 2. So negative 2 plus 2, that's going to be over 2. And I'm going to have my negative 2 again, minus 2 over 2. So when I separated the two parts now, I will have the value for x. So it's going to give me a value for x. It's going to give me a value for x. And I did it up here. So x now would be equal to 0, and x would also be equal to that negative 2. So that's the reason why we have x is equal to 0 and x is equal to negative 2. Alright, so moving on. So now we have another example. So we have 3 terms this time around. So because we have 3 terms now, we can easily find our x, our a, b, and our c. So this will be a perfect example right here. This is gonna be a perfect example. So let's get the pen out. So we should have our a x squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. Alright, so our a is going to be equal to 1, because whenever we see x by itself, then the coefficient is going to always be 1. So 1, and b is going to be equal to, b is the coefficient for the x, so the only possibility for b is going to be the 7 right there. So b is going to be equal to 7. So a is 1, b is going to be 7, and c is a constant, and the only constant is right there is 10. So c is a constant, because that is just a regular 10. It can't change. It's not going to change. So 10 is only 10. 10 is just 10. So now that we have our a, b, and c, we're just going to plug it into our formula right here. So we'll just do it right there. Okay, so we're going to have minus b. B is going to be 7. We're going to have our plus or minus sign. So negative 7 plus or minus the square root of everything inside the bracket. So b squared, b is 7, so that's going to be 7 squared minus 4ac. So 4 times, don't mind me just using the multiplication sign this time around. It changes nothing, it means the same thing. I'm just using the multiplication sign just to show you that I'm multiplying. So 4 times a multiplied by c, and c is 10. All over all over 2 times a is 1, so 2 times 1. Alright, also remember that when we're multiplying, we're gonna multiply everything in right here before we do anything to that negative 7. Alright, so let's quickly do that right here. So we're gonna have now our minus 7 plus our minus sign, the square root of. So 7 squared, 7 times 7 is going to be 49. And 4 times 1 times 10, so 4 times 1 times 10, that's going to be 40. So that's going to be a negative 40. Yeah, negative 40. All over 2 times 1, that's going to be 2. Alright, so now that we have that right there, and please note that this is separate from above. So now that we have that, so don't confuse it, and this is separate from. So now that we have this right here, it's going to continue above. So we're going to have now our negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 49 minus 40, that's going to be 9. So we're going to be left with 9 all over 2, all over 2. So that will be equal to, so we're going to have negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 9 is going to be 3, because 3 times 3 is 9. So 3 all over 2. So we're going to have our two final parts now for x. So we're going to have where, let me just separate it quickly using the highlighter. So we're going to have where x is going to be equal to negative 7. So negative 7 plus 3 all over 2. So we're gonna find that first, and then we're just gonna find what negative 7 minus 3 is going to be, right? So negative 7 plus 3 is going to be equal to negative 4. So it's going to be negative 4. So that's negative 4 all over 2. So negative 4 divided by 2 is going to be equal to negative 2. So x is going to be equal to negative 2. And then we have our next part of the the equation that we're going to solve. That's going to be, so that's going to be when negative 7 is subtracted. So negative 7 now, because of the plus or minus sign right here, that's where we're using. So we're going to do it again. So it's going to be negative 7. Since we use a plus sign this time, we're going to use our negative sign. So negative 7 minus 3 all over 2. So 7 plus 3, that's going to be 8, 9, 10. So we're going to have negative 10. So negative 10 divided by 2 is going to be equal to, so x is going to be equal to, so 2 divided by negative 10, that's going to be leave it with negative 5. Okay, so x is going to be either negative x is going to be negative 2 or negative 5. So these are two values for x right there, using the highlighter, and let's highlight it. So x is going to be negative 5, or x is going to be minus 2. Alright, so yeah, Alright, next question. So we have another equation right here. We have 16x squared minus equal to 9, sorry. So just like before, we want to ensure that we have it in the format. So a x squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. That means that we have to look for all our terms right there. Looking at this equation right there, remember that it should be equal to 0. It is not equal to 0 right here. It is equal to 9. So therefore, we need to move this 9 that is right here. Now, just like when we are solving linear equations, in order to move terms from one side of the equal sign to the next side of the equal sign, then we know that we can easily move any number from one side of the equal sign to the next side of the equal sign. The only thing is that the sign will change to the opposite. So because it's a positive 9, if I move this 9 over to the next side of the equal sign, it's going to change the positive into a negative. So I'm going to end up with this new equation, or this new quadratic equation, where I have 16 x squared minus 9 is equal to 0. Now that it's equal to 0, we can solve. So I hope you're following along when it comes down to this important point. Whenever you see a quadratic equation with solving, always ensure that it is equal to 0. Then we can solve using the formula. Alright, so now that we have our new equation, we can solve, we can find what is our A, B, and what is our C. Alright, so first use the highlighter. I'm just going to highlight my new equation. This is my equation that I'm going to work with. My 16 x squared minus 9. So my A now, my A is going to be equal to 16, because that is the coefficient of x squared. So it's going to be 16 my B now. So my B should be the coefficient of x. Remember, the coefficient is number in front of x, you know. So there's no number, there's no x term right there. So my B is going to be equal to 0, because 0 times x is nothing, 0 as well. And my C is going to be, the only constant there is negative 9. Negative 9 is just negative 9. So it's a constant. So C is going to be 9. Now that we know what our A, B, and C is, we can plug our values or substitute them into the equation to solve. Okay, so let's do it right now. So my negative B is going to be 0. So I'm going to have 0 plus or minus the square root of B 0 again, so 0 squared minus minus 4 times my A is going to be 16 multiplied by C. My C is going to be negative 9 alright, and of course, just as I told you before, I will have to multiply all of these before I look on anything. So we're going to multiply all our terms right here before we do anything else. So, and remember, don't forget about our denominator as well. So our denominator is 2a. So all of this is going to be over 2 times a. And 2 times a is going to be a16. Okay, so let's work. So we're going to have plus or minus the square root of. So now we're going to work right here. That's going to be 14, negative 4 times 16. So negative 4 times 16 times negative 9 That's gonna be equal to 576. We don't have to put that 0 square right there because 0 squared is just 0. So it will be, non-existent, gone. 0 times 0, 0. Minus anything else, it will be gone. So all of this right here is just for what was above. So after multiplying the negative 4 times 16 times negative 9, we get 576. And all of this should be divided by 2 times 16, and 2 times 16, that would just be equal to 32. Alright, so now that we have done that, we're gonna continue, but over this side of the equal sign, over this side of the board, we're gonna continue over this side where we have our plus or minus. So we're gonna have plus or minus and notice I didn't put any b before it because b is 0. It doesn't even make any sense to have the 0 in front of the plus or minus because it's not gonna really do anything. So plus or minus the square root of 576. So the square root of 576 is gonna be equal to 24. So the square root of 526 is 24. So it's gonna be plus or minus 24 all over 32. So we're gonna have two outcomes. So the two outcomes is gonna be this. Two outcomes are gonna be this, where x is gonna be equal to. So x is gonna be equal to plus or minus 24. So I'm gonna start with positive. So that's gonna be plus 24 divided by 32. Yeah, we could simplify if we want, or we could just simply divide. So 24 over 32, that's gonna be equal to 0.75, and that's a positive 0.75 because the 24 right there is a positive. So x is gonna be equal to 0.75, and x now again is going to be equal to, let's change the color for the second part. So x is going to also be equal to, so we use the plus 24, so now we have to use the minus 24. So minus 24 all over 32. So it's going to be negative 24 over 32. So that's going to be leave with a negative 0.75 as well. So let's write that right there. So x is going to be equal to a negative 0.75. So with that being said, these are two values for x, where x is equal to negative 0.75 and x is also equal to positive 0.75. Notice how the sign right here is so important at the last point, when we are doing when we are working our, when we are solving our equation using this formula. Because at the last point, I would definitely have to separate my plus or my minus, because I'm gonna need a plus or minus in order to get the two outcomes or two possibilities for x. So x is either 0.75 or x is either negative 0.75. So either way. So that's the answer for that question. Moving on to this question right here, I have 48x plus 26x equal to 35. Let's quickly work that one. So first things first, I have to write it in the form ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. Alright, so in this case right here, my a is gonna be equal to 48. My b is gonna be equal to 28. But if you realize right here, it's not equal to 0, and it should be equal to 0. So what I am gonna do, because I need to remove my 35 that's right there. So in order to remove that 35 that's right there, I am going to have to move the 35 from one side of the equal sign to the next side of the equal sign. So it's going to be, I'm going to move the 35 over to this side of the equal sign. If I move it over to this side of the equal sign, please remember that the sign changes to the opposite. So I'm going to end up with a new equation where it's going to be more like the format that you see above, because we should have it in just like this format. So we're going to have our 48 x squared plus 26 x is equal, sorry, because we move over 35, that's going to be minus 35. All of that now will be equal to 0. After doing that, you realize that we definitely now have it in the correct format, where we have our three terms, our x squared term, our x term, and our constant all equal to 0. So now that we have done that, we're going to have to write what our a is, what our b is, and what our c is. So a is going to be equal to 48, because that's the coefficient. B now is going to be equal to 26. C is going to be equal to negative 35. And now that we know what our A, B, and C is, we're just going to quickly plug it into the formula, and we will solve to find what x is equal, the two possibilities of x. So let's enter it into our formula. So that's going to be negative b, so negative b is going to be negative, or b is 26, so 26 plus or minus, so plus or minus the square root of what b is 26, so 26 squared, squared. I don't like how that tool look like a bird. Alright, so 26 squared, yeah, a little bit better, minus 4, so that's negative 4 times a is gonna be 48, so negative 4 times 48 multiplied also by c, which is gonna be negative 35. And you know we're gonna work all of this, do all this multiplication before we do any subtracting. Alright, all over 2 times a, and a is 44. So a is 48. Alright, so now that we have done that, we're gonna see what this is equal to. So we're gonna have our negative 26 plus or minus square root of, so the square root of 26, sorry, so the square root of 26, so 26 times 26, that's gonna be equal to 676. That is 26 times 26 squared, minus, sorry, you shouldn't even put that minus sign first, because we have the negative, we're gonna multiply everything out, so I shouldn't even put that negative sign as yet, because I'm gonna multiply all these terms. I'm gonna multiply everything that's right here, and I multiply everything that's right here, so I can put it right there. So I shouldn't put the minus sign as yet, because negative 4 times 48, that's gonna give me a negative number. So negative 4 times 48, that's gonna be equal to negative 192 times negative 35, that's gonna be equal to 6,000. So that's gonna be equal to a positive, so I'm gonna have a plus right there, so it's gonna be equal to a positive 6,000 720. Alright, so we're gonna add these two figures together before we square root it, or find the square root of that. But before that, we remember that we have to put everything all over. Everything is all over 2 times 48, and we know that 2 times 48 is equal to 96. So all that is going to be over 96. Alright, so now that we have that, we're going to separate the board. So use the highlighter and we're going to separate the board so we can continue. We can continue working. Alright, so we're going to continue working by putting this over to that side. So let's continue working. So we're going to have now, we're going to have our negative 26 plus or minus, so plus or minus, so the square root of, so what we're going to do is going to add these two figures together. So the square root, so 26 times 26 was the 676 right here, which is the 26 squared. 26 squared is 6 times 6, 6 times, sorry, the 26 squared is 26 times 26, and 26 times 26 is going to be 776. And after multiplying all the three terms right here, we normally multiply all the three terms. After multiplying all three terms right here, we got 6,720. So we're just going to add all these figures together, and we will get the square root of, after adding everything, we have 7,396. All over 96. Alright, so we'll continue. So square root of that is going to be equal to, so square root of that is going to be equal to 86. So we're going to have negative 26 plus or minus the square root of 7,396 is 86. So plus or minus 86 all over 96. So now we're gonna work to find our two values of x. So we're gonna separate the whiteboard again and continue working. Alright, so let's separate it right here, and we will continue working. We're gonna start at the top right there. So we're at the final stage of this problem right here, so we're gonna solve by just working this. So we're gonna have x now is equal to, remember the plus and minus sign right here, we're gonna utilize it right now. So negative 26 is gonna be negative 26. We're gonna start with plus, so plus 86 all over 96. Alright, so that's gonna be negative 26 minus 86, that's gonna be equal to 60. So we'll have 60 over 96, and that's gonna be equal to, x is equal to 0.625. So x is equal to 0.625, but there's another x that we need to find. So we're going to utilize this sign again, but we have used the addition sign, so now we're going to use the subtraction sign, part of the sign. So we're going to have our x is equal to, so that's going to be minus 26. So negative 26. We use our addition part of the sign already, so we're going to use our subtraction part of the sign. So minus 86 all over 96. Alright, so that's going to be negative plus negative, or more, when you're subtracting a positive, that's going to be a bigger negative. So we're going to add a bigger negative. So we're going to have negative 112. So x is going to be equal to 112. So negative 112. So negative 112 all over 96. And after dividing, we're going to have x is equal to, so x now is going to be equal to, so that's 112 divided by 96. That's going to give you negative, sorry, so that's going to give you a negative 1.167. I just round this to the third decimal place. So negative 1.67. So x is either going to be 0.625 or negative 1.167. So either one would work. Alright, so here we have our two values for x. Alright, moving on. So here we have our last question. And as I said, we're just going to write it out in the correct formula. So our format, so it's going to be xa. So ax squared plus bx minus, plus c should be equal to 0. So if you look right here, we have a x plus 1 where 0 should be. We need to move these two terms so we can get it should be equal to 0. Alright, so what we're going to do is to move our two terms over to the next side of the equal sign. So that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to move this x right here to the opposite side of the equal sign, and I'm going to move this 1 to the next side of the equal sign. So this is a positive x, so when I move it over, it's going to change to negative x. So now this is a positive 1, so when I move it over, it's going to change it to a negative. Alright, so we're going to have our new equation. And our new equation is going to be equal to x squared minus 3x minus 4 minus x minus 1 equal to 0. So I move over the two terms. So this x right here is a positive, it's going to change to negative. This one right here is a plus positive, so it's going to change to negative. Alright, so now that we do that, now that we have done that, we just go into group like terms. So group like terms. So when we group like terms now, we're just going to put all our like terms together and simplify. Alright, so after grouping like terms, we're going to have our x squared. And we're going to group our negative 3x with our x, so it's going to be minus x. And we're going to group our negative 4 with our negative 1. And that will be equal to 0. So our like terms now would be Our like terms will be the negative 3x and the x, and our like terms will also be the two constants that are right here. So that's negative 4 minus 1. Alright, so negative 4 minus 1. So let's simplify all of this together, and I'll write it above right here for our new equation. So we're going to have our new equation. I'm going to write it above. So that's going to be our new equation is going to be x squared. So we have minus x minus 3x, or negative 3x minus x. That's going to be a bigger minus, or a bigger negative number. So that's going to be negative 4x. So negative 4x, and we have negative 4 minus 1, so that's going to be a bigger negative number again, so that's going to be negative 5, all equal to 0. Alright, so that's going to be our new equation that we're going to use. So let's just erase all of these additional things right here. Alright, so now that this is our new equation right here, we're just going to quickly write out what is going to be our A, B, and C. So our A is going to be equal to, remember that whenever we see x by itself, our coefficient for that is going to be 1. That's for any time when we see x by itself. So A is equal to 1, B is going to be equal to negative 4. So negative 4, because we're using our new equation above right here. So C is going to be equal to negative 5. Alright, so now that we have our A, B, and C, we're going to use it in the formula. So that's going to look just like this. So we have our negative B, and our negative B is going to be negative, B is going to be negative 4. So we have negative 4. Let's write it a little bit better, because we don't want any mistakes when it comes to this part, because there's something very important that we have to look out for, and that's the sign. So negative B is going to be negative 4 plus or minus the square root of B squared. B squared is going to be negative 4 squared, so negative 4 squared minus minus 4 times, so 4 times A is 1, so 4 times A, that's 4 times 1, and C is negative 5, so times negative 5 as well, all over 2 times, so 2 times A is 1, so it's gonna be over 2. Alright, so let's work our equation out. Let's simplify. So we know that we're gonna work all of these before we deal with bringing these two terms together. So let's simplify our equation right now. So first thing is first, when you have two negative signs beside each other right here, one outside the bracket, one inside the bracket, it's gonna be negative times negative. It means negative times negative. So we're gonna end up with positive. Negative times negative is positive, so we're gonna end up with positive. This is so important. Always remember that time. When you see two minus signs beside each other like this, it's gonna change it to positive. So it's gonna be 4. So it's gonna be 4 plus or minus the square root of, so negative 4 squared, that's going to be negative 4 times negative 4. So negative 4 times negative 4 is going to be positive 16. So it's going to be positive 16. And we'll work everything right here. So negative 4 times 1, that's going to be negative 4. And negative 4 times negative 5, that's going to be positive 20. So that's going to be positive 20. And that positive 20 is everything in the yellow bracket right here, which is negative 4 times A times C. That's gonna be 20. Alright, all over 2 times 1, which is because 1 is 8, so 2 times 1 is going to be just 2. Alright, so now that we have done that, we're going to separate our whiteboard so we can continue working. So we're going to continue working right above right there. So let's continue. So when continuing, we are going to do this part right here. So it's going to be 4 plus or minus. So plus or minus 16 plus 20, that's going to be 36. So the square root of 36 all over 2. So we're just going to fix this up right here. This is because the square root of 36 is going to be 6. So we're going to have 4. Sorry. So we're going to have 4 plus or minus. The square root of 36 is going to be 6 all over 2. So now that we have reached this point, we're going to separate our whiteboard again. So we can find the 2 possibilities of x. So here we go. So x now is going to be equal to, and this is where the plus or minus sign comes into play. So we're going to use the plus first. So that's going to be 4 plus 6 all over 2, and that would be 4 plus 6 is 10 over 2. So that means that x is going to be equal to 10 divided by 2 is 5. Good. So x is equal to 5, and now we're going to find the next value. We're going to find the next value of x. So let's work. So let's work it. So it's going to be x now is going to be equal to. So we use the plus already for this sign, so let's use a minus. So it's going to be 4 minus 6 over 2. So x now is going to be equal to 4 minus 2, that's going to be negative 2 over 2. Sorry. So negative 2 over 2. So x now is going to be equal to negative 1. Okay, so these are 2 values for x. So if you notice right here, because our equation right here where we had our original equation, which was x squared minus 3x minus 4 is equal to x plus 4, we just move over the term just as how we will do it when we're solving linear equations. By moving over the terms, we will have our equation, equal to 0, and we need to have our equation equal to 0. So that's what we did right there. So we could have our new equation, which is above right here, our new equation which is right here. We have the x squared minus 4x minus c, where we could easily see what's the coefficient for our x squared term, what's the b squared, what's the coefficient for our x term, which is our b, and we could easily see our constant, and it is easily equal to 0. So we had to do that in order, to solve this equation using the formula. Alright, and by doing that, by using the formula, we easily got our answer, where x is equal to 5 and also x is equal to negative 1. Why I love the quadratic formula? Many students spend a lot of time trying to factor quadratic equations. The problem is that not every quadratic equation factors easily. But the quadratic formula doesn't care. It works whether the equation factors nicely or not. So whether the equation factors nicely or not, the formula works. The formula works all the time. So that's the reason why I love it. Once you get used to it, once you practice with the formula, your job becomes much easier, because you don't have to, because there are so many ways to factor quadratic equations. It's never one way to factor all quadratic equations. So the only way to bypass, factoring is just by using the formula. So it's very easy. So it's simply a universal method for solving quadratic equations. Final tips: whenever you're solving a quadratic equation, 1. Make sure the quadratic equation is written in the form ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. Then you identify your a, b, and c terms carefully. Next, you substitute the a, b, and c in the quadratic formula, and after that you just simplify step by step. Remember to calculate both the plus and the minus answers. And I am talking about because we have our plus or minus symbol. So that symbol right there. Please remember to calculate your plus and your minus answers. Remember, the quadratic formula is not just another method. It is one method that can solve every quadratic equation. The more you practice using it, the easier it becomes. If this video helped you understand quadratic equations, be sure to like, subscribe, and share with a friend who needs help with math. Take care. Watch, enjoy, and practice.